Hi, yesterday I went to the cinema and saw Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, the fifth and final film in the series, starring Harrison Ford as the archaeologist, alongside Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Mikkelsen, and in supporting roles, um, John Rhys-Davies, Antonio Banderas, Karen Allen, whose name is on the poster, so it's not a spoiler, and various others. This film has been in development for a long time. Uh, like many of my generation, I grew up with Indiana Jones. I grew up watching the original trilogy and enjoying them a great deal. When Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was released in 2008, I saw it with friends on opening night, and although I found it somewhat disappointing compared to the previous movies, I wasn't dismayed by it. It was entertaining, and rewatching it again, I've actually reconciled with it rather. It's not as good as the original three, but it's still a pretty decent film in its own right. Um, it really hurts me to say how disappointing I found Dial of Destiny and how poor I thought it was. It's the only film in the series not directed by Steven Spielberg. Instead, we have James Mangold, who I think was recruited largely because of the success of Logan, which provided an elegiac full stop to the story of Wolverine and Disney's hopes that he would do the same for Indiana Jones. But it doesn't really. It doesn't have that end of an era feel to it. Instead, too much of it is a badly written facsimile of what we've already seen. It's another Indiana Jones movie, but it's too long. It's over 2.5 hours long, well over half an hour longer than any of the others. It's very slow. The action scenes are far too protracted. The action scenes are also quite poorly directed. Um, the script is weak and unfocused. It spends far too long until you know what the MacGuffin of the story, the actual dial, is what it's for, what it's supposed to be. In the previous films, we're told very early on this is what the power of the Ark is. This is what the Crystal Skull can do. That has this power. We don't know what the power is of the dial for a very long time. There are characters coming and going with little explanation. We have a cameo by John Rhys-Davies, as I said, playing Salah, the Egyptian um, local expert from two of the previous films. He's now relegated to living in New York and really has contributes nothing. Antonio Banderas' character is another old friend of Indy's who appears only in the film for less than 10 minutes and could easily have been a completely different character. He could have been the son of Salah, who we meet again, and it could have been reworked in a more interesting, engaging way to make things more personal. Um, it's really it's really hard to talk about how bad this film was because it felt like a personal insult after the failure, in my eyes, of No Time to Die and providing a grim, downbeat ending for Bond. This is a grim, downbeat ending for Indiana Jones. It's lacking the fun of previous films. The One of the great selling points I thought of the Indiana Jones pictures is that they're fun, that they're relatively light-hearted, or at least can mix the humor in with the darker, more threatening material. And this is a thoroughly joyless film. There's very little humor. I think what there is handled extremely poorly because Mangold doesn't really know what he's doing. Um, and it's it just kills any momentum that the film might have. There's things happening all the time, but there's never any momentum. There's never any sense of escalation. I won't go into spoilers. I won't bother with the spoiler section because I really don't think it's worth it. Um, but towards the end, as the film goes off on unusual directions and does actually show some original thinking, there's still no sense of energy, of momentum, of escalation towards a climax. Um, I think that the villains are handled extremely poorly. Mads Mikkelsen, who at this point is very much a renter villain and very unimaginative casting, sleepwalks through his role. He really has very little to do. His character is so flat and bland. He's just a generic villain, um, and he could play it in his sleep. Um, Harrison Ford, somewhat hamstrung by his age and the attendant physical infirmity, um, doesn't get to do much of the action, and that's entirely reasonable. But there's never really any attempt to work around that. Instead, we have Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, who we know is Indy's granddaughter, goddaughter rather, who is an adventurer and something of a seeker of fortune in her own right. And much to my surprise, having disliked almost everything she's done to date, I found her to be rather good, um, rather likable and roguish and engaging, and the most interesting layered character in the film, even if those layers are very poorly handled by an incredibly clumsy script. So that was a welcome surprise, at least. Um, but there is so little to get to grips with this film. It's so insubstantial. There's none of the end of an era tone that I felt the film was sold on, of Indy looking back on his life and this being a summation, a kind of a final statement about his life as an adventurer. There's almost none of that. Instead, much of the film could work as just another Indiana Jones adventure. Um, in speaking to friends, I compared the trajectory of the five Indiana Jones films to the five Daniel Craig Bond films. The first and third are classics. The second is weak but still serviceable. The fourth is a satisfactory coda that ends on a high note, and the fifth is a disaster. Um, no Time to Die, I felt, was a very poorly thought out, poorly made film, and it, it genuinely hurts me to say that this Indiana Jones film is one of the worst films I've seen this year.